Hey, what's up? How we doing today, Kyle?
Fantastic. We're diving in.
Mm-hmm.
Season 2. I can't believe we've covered that much ground already, but we're back at it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually Season 2 episode. What episodes are
Quattro, yeah.
Oh, man. Wild. So, last episode, we wrapped up with Abraham, and we've actually got more things to examine our faith in response to. So last time it was God's promises.
Mm-hmm.
This time we're diving into some dreams, and those dreams are from a one Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big story. I would encourage you to read it yourself because there's a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to go over the high points with the help of our in-house biblical scholars. Say that 5 times fast. Phil, what do we got going on today?
Yeah, we've got Joseph, and Joseph is one of my favorites because dreams and dream interpretations and stuff like that have made an impact on my own life.
Right.
And even my marriage, but that's story time with Phil for another time.
Oh boy.
And I do appreciate the recap there, and it's a good reminder too. We're skipping Isaac and Jacob and Rebecca and like some of these like really key stories. Jacob and Esau, even not necessarily because we don't want to. Like I'd love to dig into every part, but it's time to keep moving forward on some of the spots that you and I have identified as key invitations that the Bible is making. And if we're still podcasting long enough to go back to Jacob and Esau, we will someday, or stuff like that. But for today, we were talking beforehand where we both observed that there's this interesting way that faith works with promises that God gives us, but then there's this other part about dreams that follows up after that. So Kyle, what do you think of when you think of the word dreams?
Yeah, not much of a of a dreamer as far as falling asleep and having all sorts of dreams. Not unless I eat some bad sushi or whatever. Yeah, for me, dreams are more tied into my ambitions and what I hope will happen and my intentions for the future and laying out, and co-architecting the life that I would like to have with my Creator.
Yeah, great, perfect. Yeah, the dreams that we'll be dealing with in the scripture here today are very little dreams that Joseph had, and they get him in trouble, as we'll see here soon. But they also bring about a sense of what is God doing and unfolding in Joseph. We are going to be using the term very interchangeably when it comes to being practical with this. So I'll be referring to Joseph's dreams as the literal dreams that he had, but we'll also be discussing dreams in the sense of what you were talking about as our ambitions or what we're architecting with God. I like how you put that. And, even as the dreams we might have with friendships and with our companies and with our families. So my hope is that you don't get lost in that, but you recognize the congruence there between the dreams that we have when we eat Doritos late at night and just are wacky, but also the dreams that we have that are just like, man, I really want to see this in my life. I want to see this as I pursue God, and to make space that those things do intersect.
Right.
And as I said, I don't think I would have married the wife that I have today if it wasn't for a dream telling me that she liked me. So
if that's not an invitation to stick around for future episodes, I don't know what is.
I really would like to do some like testimony and get to know you type episodes with each of us. So we'll try and get those in the schedule here soon. But I wanted to kind of preclude that to our episode to say, hey, we're gonna be talking about dreams via Joseph's dreams, but we're going to be meaning our ambitions a lot, and there can be interchange. There can also not be. I've got tons of friends that don't ever have dreams and wonder how God speaks to them, but yet they have ambitions and goals and stuff that they're trying to partner seriously with God and with others with. And we hope that you can take away the interchange.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of good stuff. We look forward to hearing from you guys. Like, what's your wildest dream that came true? And also hearing the questions that you have as you engage with not only these stories with a fresh perspective outside of your youth.
Mm-hmm.
But also, as you're on your faith journey, what does this mean as I dig deeper into the scripture, and what does this mean for my own life? What are those little nuggets of wisdom that I can take away? And how does that impact me as I move through
Mm-hmm.
life?
Yep. And it's my hope and my prayer today that the way that we uncover the Joseph story and investigate the invitation made, it might wreck your dream.
It might.
Or
We'll see.
my more real hope is that it makes your dream come even more alive and even more
Sure.
bigger and even more meaningful for you. So with that said, Kyle, I'll do the reading and spare your eyes of the tiny print.
Ah, yes, the famous tiny print Phil Bible. A teeny tiny Bible.
It helps me with speaking engagements, but I do have to play the trombone more often
There
to
you
be able
go.
to read it. So this is Genesis 37, starting at verse 2, going to verse 11, and this is where we learn of Joseph's dreams.
Yeah.
So it says, "This is the account of Jacob. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made a richly ornamented robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, 'Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it.' His brothers said to him, 'Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?' And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers."
He's getting beat up.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Also, sheaves are kind of an old school thing.
Okay, yeah,
But if you
okay.
picture like an old school picture where instead of hay bales, the wheat is gathered together in big clumps and tied together, that's a sheaf.
Yeah,
And typically
good.
then once they're collected, then they're stacked as they dry. That's what a sheaf is.
Yeah, thank you. Good catch. Oh yeah, and I mean, the language is intended to be comical here. I'm sure of it, right? They hated him. "Let me tell you this dream I had,"
Right. A little snotty brother.
They hated him more. "Let me tell you this dream I had." Like we're definitely in the cartoon level here, right?
Anyone with siblings now is like, oh, you shouldn't have done that.
Right, and if you've been listening to the podcast, we've done an episode on sibling rivalry
Yes, indeed.
here, haven't we? Right, so
That didn't end so well.
no,
For one of them, anyway.
Right, and so that's intentional by the Bible. It's intentional by us here to say, okay, we're building. This is another Cain and Abel story, but the Bible has this way of taking a story and then twisting it or taking a little turn. So pay attention for that. So let's find out what the second dream was. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars," he has 11 brothers, "were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Which is a fun note to end on. Any other thoughts, Kyle, before we move forward in the Joseph story? Other questions?
Nope. Let's keep pressing.
So Joseph, we're gonna do some fast forwarding, not with the NIV, but the PLT, the Phil Living translation here, and I'm gonna give you a summary of a good dozen chapters of the Bible here with Joseph, so we can get back to what these dreams mean. So Joseph has these dreams. His brothers already hate him. Now they hate him more and more. And so even as his father is rebuking him, we see this moment where his father's like, "Oh, maybe there's something here." He kept it in his mind. His brothers, however, don't. They sell him into slavery. They fake his death. They take his coat. They kill a goat. They take the blood, put it on his jacket, and bring it back to Jacob. And they're like,
I'll teach you to dream.
Sorry, Dad. Oh gosh, right? Splattering around your dreams all over the place, right? And so they fake his death. They sell him into slavery. He ends up enslaved to Potiphar. He's this like higher up in Egypt. And Potiphar's wife is attracted to Joseph and tries.
We're just driving. So pump the brakes there. So this whole thing, right? Like any selling into slavery, like, you know, I don't want to gloss over that, right?
Sure,
I'm sure
yeah.
there were beatings, there were, you know, you're stripped down to nothing, and you know, there's probably an arduous journey to get from where his brothers sold him into slavery into the land of Egypt. So yeah, his brothers accomplished their aims in the short term of getting their you know, retribution for their high and lofty little brother.
Yeah, no, that's really well put. Like Joseph's dream is that he would be elevated, right? So that even the moon and the sun and the stars would bow down to him, right? Which, like, we have a view of the cosmos now where we recognize, like, we are not the center of the universe, right? But that's what Joseph's dream basically was. Like, Joseph would raise above even the stars, even above the moon, even above the sun, to being the center of the universe.
Yeah.
And he's thrown into slavery and given all sorts of beatings and stuff. And even the biblical language makes use of the word goes down, goes down to Egypt, goes down into a pit, goes down into, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're building on a contrast that the Bible itself builds on in these stories as well. And on top of being in slavery, then, the person who's enslaved to has a wife that's hitting on him when his master's not there. Joseph's trying to be a good servant, a good slave, and is trying to refuse all of his the master's wife's biddings.
Yeah. Plus, he knows that that's not godly, you know, and so that's a tricky situation to be in, especially given the consequences of those situations back in what was going on in Egypt right there.
Oh, right. Which, in one of his attempts to escape Potiphar's wife, Potiphar's wife grabs his clothing, and Joseph just jets out of the house and out of his own clothing. Which, like, talk about a cartoon.
Fantastic mental image.
There's so much cartoony language in the story of Joseph. It's great.
She's got the tunic, you know. It's like you know, those lizards, right, where the bird grabs it by the tail and it's like boop, just pops off the tail and bounces
out of its own skin. You know, just
plus the, you know, the comedy of this you know, naked man dangling down the street, running to his own you know, quarters.
Yep, exactly. And then Potiphar's wife tells Potiphar, like, he tried to bed me, right? So here's another one of his articles of clothing being used against him.
Right.
And,
ooh, interesting.
Oh yeah, there's
interesting.
Stuff there too.
Okay.
Oh, I wish I had so much time for this one.
So much here. It's just another example of just the layers here.
So many layers. Oh. Anyway, I was tempted to go down that road. So Joseph gets thrown into prison, possibly even naked. We don't know. It might have been that brutal. And it's like he goes down the prison. So now he's in prison, and he's with Pharaoh's cupbearer and Pharaoh's baker. And a cupbearer is also a term that we don't often use very much in today's day and language, but a cupbearer would be the one that would taste water or taste wine before the Pharaoh would, to make sure that the wine wasn't poisoned. And so the cupbearer had the job of, hey, let's see if this is poison or not, the hard way.
Yeah. It's a great job until it isn't.
Until the moment it isn't. And for some reason, the cupbearer's in prison, and so is the baker, which definitely, like, makes you think, like, did the Pharaoh have it out for them? Did the cupbearer try and poison the Pharaoh? Like, there's all sorts of, like, why would these people as close to the Pharaoh be put in prison when Joseph's in there for, you know, you know, claimed sexual abuse against one of the higher servants' wives. So
you don't mess with Pharaoh. That's one rule in, you know, that society. You don't mess with Pharaoh, and you know, you look at somebody wrong and you're done.
Yes. And so
as the cupbearer,
let me get back to this.
As the baker finds out shortly.
Oh gosh. So Joseph's chilling with the cupbearer and the baker, and the I forget if Joseph's telling them their story or whatever, but the cupbearer and the baker have dreams.
Yeah.
And Joseph's like, I love dreams, as we all know at this point.
Right.
He loves his dreams a lot, and his dreams have gotten him into this mess.
I feel like, the fact that he's willing to tell dreams and talk about dreams at this point is astounding, considering his track record and what that's done for him. But.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, let's pause here real quick, right? How many of us have had some sort of dream, and we can't let go of it, no matter what happens? And, there's the other end, too, where we have a dream and we too quickly let go of it. But in this case, we've probably all had something where it's like, or let me put it this way, when the moment comes when that dream finally has to be let go.
Yeah.
Right? I still remember last time I put on the cleats for playing baseball. Right? That's in there, right? Yeah. Letting go of a dream that you feel is so deeply true is such a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And Joseph embodies that for us, too, in this. Dreams come up, and Joseph's like, yeah, let's talk dreams. And the cupbearer has this dream. It involves vines and grapes and stuff. And Joseph's like, oh, you're going to be restored back to service under the Pharaoh. And the baker gets all excited. I had a very similar dream with, breads and stuff on my head. And Joseph's like, oh, Pharaoh's going to cut your head off. Because this is a cartoon that we're reading, apparently, right?
I love this story, though. It's like...
And so Joseph, and this is the verse I wanted to stop on, says to the cupbearer, but when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. Now, I think Joseph's doing this because of this tightly held dream, right? But how many times did he just use the word me? Right? It's 4 times, but when all goes well with you, which, good for you.
Yeah.
Remember me, show me kindness, mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. So what we have here is Joseph has this dream that's magnanimous, and it's huge, and it's big, and it involves other people bowing to him. But here he is begging another prisoner for mere freedom.
Yeah.
For mere freedom from imprisonment. And the only person he can see, even in the cupbearer's re-elevation to a high status, is when you get there, remember me.
Right.
And a couple verses later, verse 23, the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. And I love that it repeats, right?
He forgot him.
He did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. So, remember how many times Joseph said me in one sentence. It's almost like the author is all that focus on yourself was for what?
For nothing.
Nothing, right? So there's a little bit of pausing and interpreting here of Joseph has these dreams and he's been making it all about himself.
Yeah.
Right?
Meanwhile, do you think the baker didn't realize that Pharaoh is gluten-free?
Well, that can get a lot of people ire up if there's not a gluten-free option, which I know. I've been there and I've also not been there. But yeah,
maybe that's what did it.
Yeah.
A
piece of GERD.
Yeah, exactly. You're done.
Which again, I'm sensitive to GERD, folks. I'm joking about it, but I've been there too.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, tough time to be a baker in the court.
Absolutely.
So Joseph, is still facing a conundrum of sorts with his dreams, but he's facing it. He's not letting go. Get me out of this prison. And some time passes. So back to fast forwarding with the Phil Living translation, right? So some time passes, and the cupbearer is bearing cups to the Pharaoh, and Pharaoh has this dream.
Yeah.
These dreams, and no one in Pharaoh's court can interpret them. And the Pharaoh's getting upset, which you don't want to make the Pharaoh upset.
Nope.
And out of nowhere, it hits the cupbearer. I had this guy back in prison. He interpreted my dream, and it came true. You elevated me back, and you remember that baker?
Hey, that guy.
Yeah, it's been a while since we thought about him, but he actually accurately predicted that one too. And Pharaoh's like, yeah, go get that guy.
Yeah.
Right? And so Joseph... This is a place where, I'll admit, normally the lesson kind of starts to come to a stop here. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams.
Yeah.
It means that there's going to be 7 years of abundance, but then after that there's going to be 7 years of famine, and now is the time to act. And Joseph says, gosh, who here might have the spirit of the gods that could help us deal with this thing? And it's kind of this obvious, it's clearly Joseph.
Right.
So Joseph gets kind of placed into this, I don't know, it'd be a combination of governor / vice president position,
Mm-hmm.
not only over Egypt, but Egypt's the most powerful country in the world.
Yep.
And they've got this insight to this giant famine coming, so it's only going to be even more elevated in power.
I will say that about Pharaoh,
Mm-hmm.
quick to chop someone's head off, quick to elevate them into power too. So I guess you take the good with the bad when it comes to
But
Pharaoh.
also, I'm sure the whimsical nature was terrifying.
Yes.
To have that much power and that much whimsy about you.
Yes.
It's like a baby rhino.
Oh,
in the court there, right?
Yeah.
And so, typically what we say is like, look, Joseph has these dreams. It's gotten him to this position, and then we come to this screeching halt where his brothers, during the famine, say, we don't have anything left in Canaan. Let's go down to Egypt, and they have to bow before Joseph to beg for food. And
so it seems like we're coming full circle here.
right, here comes the dream, right?
The dream comes true, right?
Kind of. So, like, Joseph toys with them, which you would think, like, Joseph would be like, hey, the dream's true. But
bow down to me, suckers!
Yeah, like, whoosh, it's Joseph.
And I would have got away with it if it wasn't
undercover
for
boss.
kids.
Undercover boss moment, right?
Yeah.
He washes off the makeup and takes
Yep.
off the wig. I'm your boss. And instead he toys with them, and he toys with them partially out of like this grief that he's still holding on to. There's actually like some really interesting psychology that happens in these chapters that if you're a Christian and into psychology, I would say study these chapters, because what Joseph experiences is this like exactly what we're talking about, this tension between dreams being fulfilled, but then he's weeping a lot. There's all sorts of stuff going on that I'll let you as psychologists handle or counselors handle, but you would think, okay, whoosh, right? Here it is, the dream's fulfilled. But he toys with them. He kind of sets them up for stealing and accuses them of it and catches them and takes one of the brothers and sends the rest back. And all becomes this ploy just to see if his father's actually still alive. Because remember, there's this tight-knit relationship.
There's a bond, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yep.
The Technicolor dream code, and the father loved him more than anything else. And so he's kind of, instead of just being satisfied, I guess, with the dream being fulfilled, he's like toying with them to get more information, more out of them. And so they come back with the father. Gosh, I went New Testament there. I'm still in Genesis. So there's this moment where it's revealed, right? So it's revealed, like finally it's the undercover boss moment. And it's like, look, it's me, it's Joseph, and they embrace each other, they mourn. You can even tell the brothers are like, oh gosh. Like,
yeah. They thought they were going to be, bakers there.
Yeah, right? there's this combination of like, oh, he's in power. Yeah. And so they both recognize this dread that comes on them, but also, oh, he could have offed with our heads by now.
Right.
And he didn't.
Right.
And so Joseph's response to this tension between seeing his brothers and finally seeing his father, he says in chapter 50, verse 20, let's see here. Actually, I might go back one verse. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. That sounds familiar.
Yep.
Right? There were some dreams about that. We are your slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So, Kyle, were the dreams fulfilled?
Yes. And no.
And no. This is what I love about this chapter, and this is what I rarely hear anyone talk about.
Yeah.
In this is
on the surface, yes.
Yeah. In what way?
The brothers bowed down.
There it was.
Okay.
Yep, and offered their servitude to him, and Joseph's right there. That part wasn't there, but Joseph's right there with them, and so the sun and the moon, right, in a sense.
Yep.
And Joseph says, "Am I God?" So remember, in the one dream, Joseph was placed at the center of the universe in the dream, right? And even the sun and the moon above him were bowing to him, and Joseph has this moment where he lets go of the dream.
Yeah.
And lets it have its own fulfillment. And what I think is so awesome, and I almost use the word magical here, thinking in cartoon language again, is the idea that Joseph's dreams were seemingly given to him by God, right? I mean, that's like when we're dreaming, we have no control,
Right.
right? Is it the Doritos, the sushi, or is it
Right.
God, right? Like,
Right.
we're
Right.
asleep. And so seemingly these dreams are given to him by God, and yet they don't find their real fulfillment until God's dreams are fulfilled in Joseph.
Right.
So these dreams of having others bow to him and all that, at the end doesn't mean a thing to Joseph compared to the recognition that God meant all this for the good, the saving of many lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So break it down. So yes, the literal dream was fulfilled, but no, in the sense that at the end of the day, Joseph was the one that was serving his brothers.
That's right.
By providing, to them for their basic needs out of necessity.
That's right.
They would have starved to death, or could have gone the other way. Joseph could have been like, "Hey, I know what you did to me, and let me tell you about my friend the baker." So yeah, that's the
twist.
The twist. Yeah, and I think it's also one of those, and this is a good reminder for me. We say we trust God, but this is how we live our lives.
Closed fists.
Closed fists, holding on to everything. And in this case, it was when the palms were up, and Joseph released that's when God's purposes were able to come to fruition. And you can see how that is opposed to the scene in the prison with the cupbearer, when he was clinging so tightly to that and begging for his freedom, when the cupbearer was in a position to elevate him.
That's right. Remember me, get me out of this, right? And sometimes, man, this could be its own episode. Like, sometimes life's circumstances just humble us.
Yeah.
Just humble us. And think about all these circumstances where Joseph goes from this braggart that knows his brothers hate him, has this dream, tells, blabs the dream all over his brothers, and they hate him all more. So he has another dream. He's like, this dream's even more extreme. Like, it's not even just wheat bowing to me, it's the whole universe bowing to me. Blah. And they hate him all the more. And man, there's so many like micro lessons here of like, what does it mean to have dreams that don't make us arrogant? What does it mean to have dreams but still hold them with open hands to see how God might have a twist on it? And I think the invitation here is to dream big dreams. Right? Like, let's go big and recognize that those dreams aren't going to be fulfilled until God's dreams are fulfilled in us. I think that's the key here, is to recognize that, did God give Joseph those dreams? I actually think so. I don't think that was just, some bad hummus he had or something. Right. Before going to sleep that night in Canaan. I think God gave him those dreams knowing that it wasn't about their fulfillment. It was about humbling him.
Yeah. Wow.
And allowing God to work in him. And there's so many ties to like Jacob and back to even the Cain and Abel with all that hopefully you're picking up on as you've listened to some of our previous episodes. But let's before we close out this episode, what does that mean practically for our dreams, right? Like, not you and I are likely not going to be the governor of Pennsylvania or the vice president of the United States with the dreams that we have, but we each have dreams, right? So like, as you're thinking through, okay, this is a fun invitation where it's like our dreams need to have God's dreams fulfilled in us to truly be fulfilled, right? Like, I don't know, how does that hit you practically in some of the dreams and goals that you have for your life?
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder of again, kind of full circle to the beginning of this podcast, is, what are we putting our faith in? And I think that if we put our faith in dreams before God, that can mess with the proper order, whereas it seems like, as in the case of Joseph, the dreams had a place
That's right.
in the faith that God was going to pull through. And I think that another note there would be always use discernment. Never just take
Good.
this stuff at face value. Especially when it's someone else's dream. I certainly and especially based on this story, don't discount, but have proper discernment. And maybe that's a podcast for another day of like, what is discernment? How do we determine what's from God and what's not? And on the subject of dreams in the form of aspirations, I'll break it down like this. And this is a little bit of a different approach, right? So I want these things. I would like XYZ to happen. I would like my life to look like, insert these benchmarks of a happy, successful life here, right? As that specifically translates to your own version of that. And I guess what I would ask you guys to take a look at is, okay, if I am the person that has these things, okay, what needs to change in my way of being if all of this doing is to happen, right? So that can be a tricky one, that can be nuanced, but I think that's a big piece of the journey is who do I need to become? What do I need to work on so that I'm the type of person that can handle? Because if you know anything about how this works, the more we're given, the more responsibility we have. And that's not only material wealth, that's also how we interact with people. Typically, as you move up in responsibility, you're not only interacting with more people, but your choices also have a heavier implication on others. So, if you look at this in the business world, the number one people leave their workplace is because they're unhappy with the relationship that they have with their manager, right? So I know a lot of you probably have aspirations of moving up the chain. Well, guess what? That's probably going to land you in a management position at one point, right? So what do I need to do, right? But more importantly, who do I need to be such that I'm the type of person that elevates others, that calls them into their highest potential? That's just one example of a way you can look at applying some of these things.
Yeah, really good. Yeah. It made me think of even like the namesake of this podcast, right? The invitation pod. And that was intentional because that's the type of posture.
Right.
That you and I have been influenced by our talks over scripture is that we see God giving commands for sure, right? But this is not the command podcast where we're commanding you to do a whole bunch of things. Like there's something about God's character in his invitation towards each of us to go deeper in our walk with each other, but mainly with him in the way that we value family and friendship and our professionalism and our jobs. That we've felt invited to, and that's really stemmed all the way into how we named this podcast.
Yeah.
A quick one for me, I'll get theological first, but I promise that I'll answer my own question about getting practical, is one of the interesting aspects of interpreting the whole of the book of Genesis now that we've ended it is Joseph almost appears to have succeeded where Adam and Eve didn't. Adam and Eve were set as image bearers to rule over the Garden of Eden, right? And the Pharaoh was known to be like the image bearer of Ra, the sun god.
Yeah.
And Joseph's paired up right there with him as an image bearer of God himself. And he's ruling over the known world basally during this famine.
It's a rosy picture.
Serving. And he's ruling in a way that it's actually benefiting those around him. And so there's this kind of question of like, oh man, did Joseph fulfill this call? And we know that there's 65 more books of the Bible telling us no. Right? And so
close.
Well, we'll cover that a little bit in the next episode, just a little bit. We're not going to dive into all the reasons why that occurred, but practically that is actually helping us to have this callback to some of the very first episodes that we did. And that's why we spend so much time in those first couple of chapters of the Bible, is because they do influence the way that we transform in our discipleship with God.
Right.
So if discipleship with God is just praying a prayer once and having the confidence of going to heaven, and then sharing the gospel in words with others, but doesn't actually change the way that we view our place in the world as image bearers, right? There's this intersection between the divine and the earthly, and making all things new, stuff that we'll get into in the New Testament, as Joseph did, right? Joseph was able to bring divine wisdom to a famine and make something of death still breathe life, right? And we are called to do that in the way that we view management and leadership and sales and marketing and politics and, cupbearing and baking and, even the trades are supposed to be something where we say, I'm an image bearer in this as well, not just in my sharing of my faith, but in the way that I go about wine and baking and coffee and all these other things. It's National Coffee Day today, as we record.
How about it?
And so, practically it's this idea of, if you have those dreams that make anything of the world around you, whether it's something kind of intangible like leadership, maybe it's tangible like coffee, right? The idea here is, Lord, take my dreams and fulfill your promises in them, fulfill your dreams in them. What does that look like? And if your dreams being lived out isn't helping others thrive, isn't helping people survive their own personal famines, right? If it's being lived out in a way that, like, you're just constantly being hated on, now there's a sense of persecution, right, that can happen in living out. But if people are only hating you all the time, maybe like Joseph, it's time for some humbling and time to introspect and say, am I pursuing my dreams in the wrong way? It's at least one of those open-handed moments you should have. Is this persecution, or am I just a braggart that's just blabbing my dreams all over the place?
Right.
And so I would hope that this is one way that you see that invitation is, hopefully, if you're listening to this on your commute to work, that even this day, you could say, what are my dreams in this job? And how can I hand them back over to God? And how is God fulfilling his dreams in me today at my job?
Yep. Yeah.
Any other thoughts from you, Kyle?
There's so much here. There's so much to unpack, but like everything, if you can, I would say take 3 minutes and ask the Lord what he wants you to take away from this. And if it's just one thing, great.
Yeah, cool. Good. Well, I hope you enjoyed the twist here on Joseph's dreams being fulfilled and seeing them in a new light. I hope that makes a practical difference to your day and your work and your family, your roommates, whatever, maybe even in your coffee today. And so with that, may your dreams come true for the benefit of others as God fulfills his dreams in you.
Till next time.
Thanks for listening to the Invitation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, kindly invite others, see what I did there, Kyle, to listen in by sharing it with a friend, posting about it on social media, or even leaving a rating and a review.
To catch all the latest and greatest, give us a follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X at The Invitation Pod, and help us share the invitation with others. Thanks again. We hope you'll tune in to future episodes.